Hey guys, hope everyone out there is doing well. Here I am in a familiar place, taking a familiar drink. Good stuff. I had somebody on one of my viewers a few days ago ask something about if I had weighed the pros and cons of getting U.S. citizenship for my wife. As many of you know, my wife went through the naturalization ceremony, the oath taking ceremony not too long ago, and he said that he was kind of trying to decide or thinking about moving to the Philippines versus maybe marrying a Filipina and having her come to the States. And he just wanted to know what I thought about that, the pros and the cons. And pardon me if some of what I share right now is repetitive because I know I've probably talked about some of these issues on other videos, but I thought it was a pretty good topic, a good thing to share with you a little bit about, and I'll share with you some of my thoughts. I am by no means claiming that I'm just the all-around expert on this, but I will share with you some things based on my experiences and observations to give you a little starting place. One of the questions I remember when I first started doing this channel was, why did you ever move back to the United States in the first place? And I'll kind of repeat that and then get into the pros and cons of U.S. citizenship for your Filipino wife. We were living in the Philippines. We got married there. We were there for about a year, but when I was in the Philippines, I was a Christian missionary, and that meant I was living on whatever I could raise in terms of raising support, donation, and that kind of thing. And I did okay as a single guy because you know how it is when you're a bachelor, you can pretty much get by on a relatively small amount of money, especially in a place like the Philippines. But I had to start thinking about the future when Chris and I got married. And we decided even before we got married that we would spend the first year or so in the Philippines, but that we would apply for our citizenship pretty quickly and move to the United States. So that's what we did. We were in the Philippines for about a year or so, and we got by. The donations, living on donations and fundraising and all that. I'm not a very good fundraiser, so we got by, but I really wanted something more stable for us. And that's why we ended up moving here. So that's my background. If you are independently wealthy and just kind of can live anywhere in the world you want, regardless of if your income is set for life somehow, you've got a lot of money somewhere and you can live anywhere, or if you have some type of job, let's say internet marketing, something that allows you a lot of mobility, then some of these things I'm going to share may or may not apply to you, but you can just think about them. In terms of the cons, the drawbacks to getting U.S. citizenship for your Filipino spouse, there are really only two that I can think of. I'll give you the bad news first, and these are the only two. The first would be the price. There are a lot of fees and everything involved with going through the naturalization process, because first you've got visas and all that, and basically every step along the way is costly. Just to give you an example, when we applied for my wife's 10-year visa, her permanent resident visa, if memory serves me correctly, that was about $600 or $700. Same thing goes for her U.S. citizenship. That was also $600 or $700. So each step is expensive. And I think probably what would be the bigger drawback for some of you is the fact that for your Filipino spouse to get American citizenship is you do have to spend significant time in the United States. So you've got to be in the U.S. for, probably 4 or 5 years. It just kind of depends on what type of visa you're doing, spousal versus fiance and other things like that. But I think that is one of the biggest drawbacks, or one of the biggest things guys consider when they think about getting a U.S. citizenship for a Filipino spouse is maybe a lot of guys are thinking, well, I want to be in the Philippines. I don't want to have to spend all that time in the United States. So those are the two biggest drawbacks, is the expense of the process and the fact that you and she are going to have to spend significant time in the United States together. Now, in terms of the pros, what are the advantages of your Filipino wife getting U.S. citizenship? There are quite a few, and these are a lot of things that I've looked into or thought about, I'll put it that way. And one of the main ones is now that my wife has a U.S. passport, she can go wherever I go. And that was not always the case. Just as an example, I've shared with a lot of you that my wife never got to meet my mother because my mother actually died when we were doing the visa process. So my wife and I were married in March of 2012. My mom passed away that following December before my wife's visa was approved. So my wife never got to meet her. And even when I came to the United States to speak at my mom's funeral and to be there for that, my wife could not come to that. I had to leave her behind in the Philippines for that week because there was no way for me to get her to the United States. Now, on that subject, keep in mind that getting your wife a tourist visa just to visit the United States temporarily is not a given thing. I've known a lot of guys, and I'm talking 5 or 6 guys, that's just a minimum that I can think of right off the top of my head, who are or were living with their wives there in the Philippines, and they wanted to bring their wife to the United States, had every intention of coming back to the Philippines. They just wanted their wife to meet parents or whatever, and they could not get a tourist visa for their wives. So that's a difficult situation. And if you were to somehow set up your wife with, let's say, a house in the Philippines, or if she has significant assets in the Philippines in her name, then the tourist visa is a possibility. But a lot of guys are doing just what I was doing. They were renting in the Philippines. They have most of their assets in banks in the United States. And so all this to say that the nice thing about an American passport is your wife can go wherever you go. And that's the advantage we have now. If we wanted to travel through Europe or anywhere, that would be more difficult if my wife did not have a U.S. passport. What else? There are financial benefits involved with it. As an example, one day my wife will be eligible for Social Security. And I'm not just thinking government benefits here. I have a life insurance plan. If something happened to me, then that would take care of my wife. And if she were not a U.S. citizen, or let's just say we were in the Philippines, that would make matters a little bit more complicated. We do have a relative that was married to an American, and he passed away and left her a significant amount of his estate. And I do think the fact that she wasn't a U.S. citizen kind of complicated that a little bit. And I think she worked it all out, but I would just want no complications involved with my wife being protected financially. And another thing to consider too is my wife, since she's a U.S. citizen, if something happened to me in addition to the life insurance, she would not have any issues working. She could get a job and support herself. And as all of you know, the opportunities for that in the Philippines are just not the same as they are here in the United States. Last but definitely not least, another thing that I thought about in this whole process was our children. Now, obviously, our children would automatically be eligible for U.S. citizenship because I'm an American. I'm talking about even when we were still in the Philippines. But part of what I began thinking about too is, okay, yes, our children could be U.S. citizens, no problem. But what if somehow we ended up in a situation where my children wanted to move to the U.S. and then my wife couldn't even go visit them because she's not a U.S. citizen? Now, I don't know how far-fetched that possibility is, but I'm just glad that all these possibilities that I'm sharing with you, financially, family, all this, those are now things that we don't have to worry about now that my wife is a U.S. citizen. I've mentioned before that you can get a Filipino can get what's called dual citizenship. When when a Filipino becomes an American citizen, he or she revokes the Filipino citizenship, but he or she can go back to a Philippine consulate, and you have to pay a little fee and take a vow, and you can be a dual citizen. So if ever we wanted that option, then my wife pretty much has the best of both worlds. She can live either place that she wants to. So those are some of the things that I thought I would share with you about that, and I hope you find this information helpful.